Today's video is going to be something that is it's going to be a big sway away from the content that I've made so far. Before I go any further into the narrative of today's topic, I want to explain what my goal is with my channel. When I first started my veterans program, it was to help some men that I had found a commonality with, because we shared a warrior spirit. And I have a deep respect for any man that's willing to put his life on the line for agency bigger than himself. And so when I first started the program, it was to help these guys to not suck start their 40 cals, or not go down a dark path. But then I started to find out that a lot of these guys were going down this darkness because of the way that we grew up, the way that we were viewing the world was a little bit skewed. And a lot of us had some experiences that brought us to a stark reality that things weren't what we thought they were. And so that in turn we started a men's program where the men that I work with and the young boys that I work with, I try to educate them to the truth about the way that the world actually works. Not what we're told, not what we're sold, not what we're coerced to believing, but what's actually going on. And so that's the point. Operation Reengage is a men's program, and the program that I wrote in order to help men right their own ship is the 90 Days of Suck program, which is based on helping men change the framework that they operate in this society, and to change what manhood means in this society. And the reason why I say that is because I firmly believe that most of us were raised with faulty, actually just really, really faulty belief systems about the way things were. But realistic, I mean, when you look at our history, the trajectory of where we've gone, the last 40, 50 years there's been a big change. There's been a big change in everything in our society. And so that brings me, so today we're in a place where there's definitely a shift going on. There is a push for change. And if you can't see that, you're not paying attention. They've been trying to do away with what we've grown up to think of what a man was supposed to be. They've been trying to massacre that guy for a long, long time. And all you have to do is just pay attention to what you see on television and in the movies, and it's not hard to see. Like they have pretty much whittled men down to be worthless buffoons, just jackasses waiting for women to give us guidance and show us where to go. So my channel, this whole movement that I'm doing here, my whole effort is to help men find their way out of the fog of what we've been taught, and the trap that a lot of guys find themselves into and caught in. So that's with that, I'm going to move into the point of this video. Now, going forward, I want to take a little history lesson. Just take a little walk down history. Let's look at how do you destroy something? Like what's the best way to destroy something or a group of people and get away with it? I'll give you two examples, and then I'll move forward, and then it'll make sense when I tie it together. First, I want to talk about Libya. A lot of people here in America think that Muammar Gaddafi was a terrible guy, and that what happened to him, it was justifiable. Okay, If you watch the news in America and you just blindly go along with what you're spoon fed, then yeah, he was a terrible guy. But if you do any research into what that dude was actually doing over there and what he was doing with his people, you'll see how tragic what happened to him actually was. Because what we're told here on the news was this guy was, a terrible dude, and that he needed to be taken out because he was oppressing his people and he was just a terrible dictator, right? Well, the truth of the matter is this guy was actually in the process of building his country into an independent power. And what actually got that dude killed was the fact that he was going to get off of the dollar and start his own gold-based currency. Now, if you pay attention to anything about how empire works, as long as you do what you're told, then everything's good. But the moment you decide that you're going to do it on your own, you're fucking dead. And that's what happened. But this is the sneaky part about it. We didn't just go take him out. What we did was we snuck some alphabet people in there. They went in there and just whispered. And they actually convinced the people that this man that he was helping, that he was hurting them. And with the help of whatever dark black ops shit, this coup happened. And they drugged this man through the streets like a peasant. And what they did to him was horrendous. The man that was changing their country. So what they did was they went in, they subverted everything, and they just poisoned the population. They poisoned the populations with lies and propaganda. And when it was time, the people did what they did. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit further back though. One that almost everybody knows about because people feel so entitled to use this dude's name whenever referring to somebody that they don't like. We're going to talk about Germany during Hitler's reign. Now, everyone knows what happened with the SS and the Jews. The way that they did that was they picked a group of people, they cast them out, they painted them as monsters, vermin, trash, and they created a disconnect. Just like in Libya, they created a disconnect in the people. These people were living in the German community. The Jewish people that were there in other communities where the Nazi ideology took off, the Jewish people, until that ideology, until that mindset, until that poison took off, these people lived next door to each other. They coexisted. And whatever prejudice, racist, whatever ist you want to put on there, whatever was there, it was workable. But when it was time to massacre those people, when they flipped the switch, it was easy. And if you read the Gulag Archipelago and read the soldiers that were involved in that, it was a systematic poisoning where they went step by step by step. Because if you just go and start bombing, then you have to answer questions. If you just start murdering people, that's going to mess with people's sensibilities. So what you have to do is you have to cast people off. You have to separate them from society. And once they're separated, you have to turn everybody against them. So once you castigate these people away from the society, then you start throwing insults and hurt, you all of these negative things, you start doing that to those people. And then when it's time to go weapons hot, it's really easy to look at that entity as not a person anymore. They're the oppressor. They're all of this negative shit. And so the reason why I give those two examples, if you look at what we're going through in America and what we've been going through for a while, but especially right now, in the framework of that, it's not really hard to see the group that is being cast off and demonized right now. And up to this point, we have had, it's just been, loudmouth feminist and, all of the people that aren't men, aren't traditional men. And it's been pretty much, that type of talk is like hearing somebody talk shit that, just they're over across the fence. They're just talking shit. They're nobody. But this morning I was going through my emails and I got a notification of the Better Bachelor, and he brought the attention to this article that is on the Daily News, and it is absolutely disturbing for any man that has old school masculine traits. And the way that they've done this was they coined the term toxic masculinity. Now, that is a convenient term that is so expansive, because anything that a man does that a woman or whatever else doesn't like, it falls under that. So whatever it is, your aggressiveness, whatever it is, what makes men pretty much on a baseline has become evil. And with when the feminists were saying it, it's easy to look that off because it's just a bunch of chickens cackling about stupid shit. But now what we have is a real problem. And what men really need to start doing right now is really listen to what the red pill dudes are talking about. And I'm not talking about the dudes that are espousing, the guys that are paying all the attention to women's hypergamy and constantly going after things to go, to point at what we all already know. Those dudes are just bathing in their own sunlight right now, because they've got a lot of guys that are probably incels and dudes that have been hurt. They want to hear that. When you're hurt, you want to hear that. This message right here, it needs to be heard by all men. All men, and if you're a father of a young boy, this is critical information. What they're doing right now is what Hitler did to the Jews. We have already been set aside, and now what they're doing is they are labeling us dangerous. This is a short article. I'll read it, and we will discuss some key points here. It's called, the title is Traditional Masculinity Officially Labeled Harmful by the American Psychological Association. So this isn't a bunch of dorks. This is the APA. These are people that are going to pretty much dictate the guidelines of what mental health is and what psychopaths. These are the people who they call into court to testify against somebody if they're insane, or to determine their threat to society. The American Psychological Association has issued its first official warning against toxic masculinity. The new guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men marks the first ever report published by the association aimed at helping practitioners care for their male patients despite social forces that can be harmful that can harm mental health. Citing more than 40 years of research, the APA warns against the quote unquote masculine ideology, which it defines a particular constellation of standards that have held sway over a large segment of the population, including anti-femininity, achievement, eschewal of appearance of weakness, and adventure, risk, and violence. So this is, first, if you just overlay the timing, the last 40 years, they're pointing out men's reaction to things. They're pointing out how men have showed up in reaction to what's been going on in our country for the past 40 years. I want you to keep that in mind. Traditional masculinity ideology has been shown to limit males' psychological development, constrain their behavior, result in gender role strain, and gender role conflict and negatively influence mental health and physical health, according to the 36-page report featured in January's issue, Monitor on Psychology. Conforming to the norms of the quote-unquote masculinity ideology can result in suppressing emotions and masking distress in young boys, as well as more risk-taking and aggressive behavior and a lack of willingness to seek out help. The report additionally contends that this can lead to traits like homophobia and pave the way for sexual harassment, bullying, and violence against others and themselves. The APA also invoked a series of sobering statistics to emphasize that quote-unquote traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. For example, despite being 4 times more likely to die of suicide than women, men are significantly less likely to be diagnosed with internalizing disorders because they don't conform to traditional stereotypes about men's emotionality. Men in the United States also commit an estimated 90% more homicides than women and are also much more likely to be arrested for domestic violence. Despite its warning, the APA also encouraged men to embrace the positive aspects of traditional masculinity like leadership and courage. Though men benefit from the patriarchy, they are also impinged upon by the patriarchy, says Ronald F. Levant, ED, a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Akron and co-editor of the APA volume, The Psychology of Men and Masculinities. Guidelines for the psychological practice with men and boys additionally calls on those treating male patients to recognize their own bias and urges them to address how power, privilege, and sexism work, both conferring benefits to men and by trapping them in their narrow roles. Okay, now what I want to talk about in particular is this. Number one, the number one problem here with this is there's not one mention about any studies into why this statistic is so high. Why is it that men are 4 times as likely to commit suicide? You know, there are real reasons. There are real burdens that are placed upon men, like their children being taken away from them, by like everything being taken away from them in a divorce by a woman that actually added nothing to what she took. And all the different things that men have to deal with that women aren't equally punished for or held accountable for. None of these things come into play, none whatsoever. And the idea that there's some sort of equality, some sort of balance, it's absolutely fucking retarded, because there's not. I'll give you a little example. This happened to me when I was in my 20s, and I should have opened my eyes and realized what it was, but at the time I thought it was just a race issue. Now, when I was in college, this girl that I was dating, she ended up getting pregnant. Okay, so she ended up getting pregnant, and in the middle of the semester, that's when I found out. And because my dad was such a wonderful piece of shit, I didn't want to do what he did. And so when I talked to this girl, she swore to God up and down that I was the only person that she'd been with, and that was it. And so I dropped out of college. My dream was to play football and to make a career as an athlete, but I needed to go to work. I needed to go to work and take care of my child. There was no option for me. And so I dropped out of school, went to work, and then she gets pregnant again. Now, while she's pregnant the second time, in that time, I find out that the first child wasn't mine. When I found out about that, I was pissed. And so I got up to leave the house, and she gets up to block the door. All I did was I opened the door and I left. Because I left, she got pissed off and called the police on me. The police tracked me down, and I went to jail. I had to pay court call. I had to do all of this shit because she told them that I did something to her. There was no marks, there was no proof, there was no nothing. As a matter of fact, she didn't follow through with anything. It was just a reaction. There was no punishment whatsoever. Here's the beautiful part about it though. When I went on my extended vacation for being a jackass when I was younger, I got put on child support. Not only did I get put on child support for my kid, the courts also put me on child support for the first kid that she lied about, and the judge told me that I was responsible for that until she figured out who the fucking dad was. I had to get an attorney and fight that. There was no payback of the money that I paid once she finally tracked the guy down, and I got absolved of the responsibility. There was no getting my money back. There was no charges filed for anything. Now, if you put it in the context of a man, if you work for a company in 18 years, they find out that for the past 18 years, you've stolen money from them and they can prove it, you will go to jail. You will go to jail and you will have to pay restitution of those people. But when you look at the way that the court system works, if a woman lies about paternity to a man, knowingly or unknowingly, if it can be proven that this child isn't that man's, that wasn't his seed, and he didn't know it, she technically stole that dude's money, especially if it's played out in a child support situation like that. If a dude is supporting a child that's not his, unbeknownst to him, there's no charges that can be filed. There's no fraud, there's no anything. But if you work for a job and steal $500 a month, you will go to jail. So when you look at all the different ways that men have to deal with shit in this society, of course they're 4 times as likely to commit suicide because they deal with a minimum 4 times as more shit. The punishment's 4 times harsher. Life sucks 4 times as much for most dudes. It's hard as shit, and that's why it's happening. But this is the overlay of what this study says that is absolutely mind-blowing to me. So the last around 1960 is when the sexual revolution happened, and then we get the birth control pill, and then we get this just outbursting of whore activity. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, men have held pattern. They've held on to a twisted ideology about what it meant to be a man and how women were supposed to show up. Well, they changed the game. They took all the rules away and told women, you know what, be what you want to be. Okay, and while that's happened, all of the things that they became, everything that they did, the single mothers skyrocketed. Everything negative for our society skyrocketed with this. The overlay between that and this study is, how do you deny it? How do you not see how what the MGTOW red pill community, what these guys know, what we're trying to say folds into this? There is no accountability whatsoever to anyone for what is, it's everything male is bad. Everything male, everything traditionally male is now being demonized, and they're putting it on a watch list. They're putting it on a list to where you can look at a person who is a traditional male, who is competitive, who is dominant, who is aggressive, and that's a mental disorder now. Stoicism has its foundations in shutting your fucking mouth, not worrying about things that you can't control, and really working to be the best person that you can be, to be the best influence on your society that you can be. That's what a real leader does. A real leader doesn't talk about stuff, they do it. How is the markers, how are the markers of a leader? Stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression are all valuable traits in a leader. But what these people that are supposed to be so smart are saying is, in one breath, traditional masculinity, which is marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. And then last breath, you want us to embrace the positive aspects, like leadership and courage. How the fuck are you supposed to lead if you don't have any sort of aggression? If you're not dominant, how is that supposed to work? Men, you have to understand where we are. You have to understand where we are. All of the talk and the strain and the worry about hypergamy and all of this stuff, man, once you hear the message that you need to hear, look at another one. This is something that you need to tighten your belt around. This is going on because men allow it. Men allow it. And the way that men are showing up, doing what we're doing, we're showing up as victims. It's time, it's really, really time for men to start paying attention to what you've been taught to be so blind to. This isn't a group of goofballs talking. This is APA, man. It's APA. If a group of doctors, if the medical association said that having a penis was in a whole harmful, would that get your attention? Because this is pretty close to this. This is pretty close to this. Men have, we've got to start working. We've got to start working towards pushing the narrative that we want, instead of falling back, crying about the one that's being issued to us, and whining about, women that are swinging from branches and everything. It's really time for men to become men. Like Marcus Aurelius said, it's time to stop arguing about what good men should be, and it's time to be one. It's time to pay attention, men. It's time to pay attention. Do some research. Do some research and just see if you can see a pattern. See if you can see a pattern in how you destroy great men, how you destroy a population of people. We are in the middle of an attack. This attack, this construct is really pushing for a bunch of castrated, smooth, ballless, spineless, malleable cuck pussies. Is that what you want to be? Pay attention, men. Out.